Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gio and Joey show. We're Sans Gio tonight. He's traveling, so please keep him and his family in your prayers. But anyway, this evening I'm really happy to welcome a friend. As is becoming a regular occurrence, that many of our guests come from an obscure Reaganite chat on X, but there's a lot of good people in there. This guest is no exception. It's John Morgan. And we're going to have a little chat. I was excited to have a little chat about Christians in the Trump era. And I thought he had some really good thoughts on that. He's a Christian, an evangelical Christian in this era. And I think it will be a fruitful conversation. So thank you for coming on, John.
Very glad to be here. Very honored. I know you had a wide variety of folks on here, and I'm glad to join the crowd.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess to start out, um, well, I guess kind of broadly, what got you what made you, decide to get on X, made you decide to kind of speak out, right, against what has become kind of a prevailing view in American Christianity?
That's a good question. I don't know how high profile my voice is. I mainly react to what other people say and interact with other people's posts. My own posts are I would say limited to personal things, limited to football and things a lot more trivial than politics. Every once in a while, I'll post something that intentionally non-controversial though, but I do interact with a lot of people. I follow a lot of people on this app just because this is where conversation happens. X, Twitter, whatever you call it, is not real life, but it does influence real life and it drives real life decisions, real life decision makers more than we think. So I have always been, ever since the internet's been around, I've been on one sort of conservative forum or another, and the conversation has just moved over to X.
Hmm. No, what are you Southern Baptist?
I am. I
You're Southern
am
Baptist. Okay.
lifelong.
Very nice, very nice. So, when you look at kind of the discourse, say on, and again, I like that you pointed out that online isn't real life, but it affects real life.
Mhm.
But in the online Christian space, how would you how would you how would you describe kind of the state of affairs or like the playing field?
Oh, it's a train wreck. It's a dumpster fire because you have influencers on X. Some of them are not paid. Some of them are paid. Some of them are being paid through two or three different levels to influence conversation and really to influence organizations. And you have organizations that are trying to influence folks, organizations like the Southern Baptist Convention, the Presbyterian Church in America, and the Anglican Church in North America, just to name a few. And you've got players that are using X to influence all those organizations. And it looks a lot bigger on X than it does in real life, but nonetheless, you can't run away from the influence. But when you get to the floor of, for instance, the Southern Baptist Convention, the issues that they push don't pass, primarily because of the people that are pushing those issues. So they're not doing themselves a favor by the way that they pursue discourse on this app.
Mm. So I agree with that there. And like I know the recent controversy at SBC with ERLC, the Ethics and Religious
Ethics and
Liberty
Religious
Commission.
Liberty Commission.
Yeah. And like obviously I'm an outsider to the SBC. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, but as someone and as our denomination, we really care about religious liberty, but also like a moral voice. Like
Absolutely.
I've always looked at the ERLC from the outside as like a great institution, like
Absolutely.
standing up for life and religious liberty.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the main driver of backlash, right? Because they got like what, 40% of the vote to like dismantle it?
42%, if I remember right. I would say primarily it's Trumpism. There are no, unlike, for instance, 30 years ago, there are no liberals left in the Southern Baptist Convention. Everybody's a conservative of one stripe or another. The only difference is, do they really, really like Donald Trump? Do they just hold their nose and vote for him? Or do they not like him at all? So this is purely backlash, and some of it is influence from outside forces, but it's purely backlash against leadership. For instance, the president that just resigned, because while he was very conservative, said all the right things, did all the right things, his record speaks for itself. but he didn't support Trump. And they want somebody in there that supports Trump.
So it really comes down to it's just all about how you voted, or
In my opinion, it's not so much how you voted, but how vocal you are, how willing you are to be on the team, how willing you are to be on the Trump team. Because you've got folks that are going up to DC and having the photo op with Trump and being on the prayer council, being on what is it, the Faith Values Council or something, going up there with Paula White and some of the other folks, and they want the ERLC to be front and center in that. And the ERLC has been sticking to issues that the convention has voted on, which is good because, again, they are strong defenders of life, defenders of religious liberty, which is a Baptist distinctive and it is deep in Baptist history. But at the same time, they want a culture warrior. They want somebody to go up there to fight culture war, and they believe Donald Trump and his administration is the best vehicle to do it.
Mhm. So, and I'm glad you brought up that you talked about the history of Baptists on religious liberty. And that's one of the things I've always most admired about Baptists, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
among other things. But one thing that we've seen, and obviously I know you know about it, is kind of the rise of like Christian nationalism. And I know Christian
Yes.
nationalism is broad, right? So it's not just Southern Baptists. But how how is it that the Southern Baptist contingent of like Christian nationalists, how do they, in arguments or whatever, how do they justify those two things, right? Like the historic Baptist position,
Mhm.
Roger Williams,
Right.
and then Christian nationalism.
That's a really good question, and I haven't examined their arguments in too great a detail, other than they would come back and say, well, this time is different because if we don't defend for ourselves, if we don't fight for Christian values, and if we don't fight for our place in the public square, then we're going to be persecuted and we're going to lose everything that we have. And some even go so far as to say we're going to be loaded up on trains and being sent to camps. That's not going to happen. I don't believe that's going to happen. But at the same time, I believe you have some folks. I don't think they're a majority. I think they're a loud minority. And again, X magnifies voices. But at the same time, I think in some corners they forget about our position on religious liberty, our historic stance on religious liberty, and they forget that Baptists never had any power anywhere until we got to the US and really started evangelizing in places in the South and the Midwest. Our forefathers were persecuted in Europe. We had people that were burned at the stake. We had people that were hung for beliefs such as believers' baptism. We come from a rich heritage. Our forefathers came to this country and pushed back against the state church. And that's something to be grateful for and something to be thankful for and something that we need to remember. And also, we need to trust the Lord in our battles and not just take things into our own hands. And when we fall into things and we start pursuing things such as Christian nationalism, one, I don't believe it would ever happen. It would never get elected in any type of format. But at the same, but also, we just forget one, where our power comes from. It doesn't come from elections; it comes from the Lord. But also, we forget where we came from, and we came from a group of people that never had any power at all. And Jesus never told us that we would have power on this earth, but one, all power on heaven and earth belongs to Him. And therefore, that power is not ours, it's His. And
Mhm.
if He wants to work and if He wants to move in this country or any other country, He can do that. And He is free to do that. And it'd be awesome if He used us to do that. But God's work isn't necessarily taking over the governments to make it safe for Christians and people who are friendly to Christianity. That's that's not biblical and it's not constitutional.
Hmm. I totally agree. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on this too. So, one of the things that I find is the most disturbing. So, like, I remember when I was a kid. So, obviously, I grew up Adventist. So, I always say like we're evangelical adjacent, right? And very much like when even as a kid, like obviously there was, evangelicals strongly supported President Bush, and my
Mm-hmm.
family, we certainly did. And well, I've disagreed. Like looking back, like I have disagreements with him, but like I would love that era now.
Oh,
Seems
absolutely.
seems like quaint. But one thing that at least maybe it was just my perspective as a kid, but even like watching media, watching the news, the language around of Christian conservatives and stuff, it didn't seem to be as like obviously the left has always, criticized Christians, for our
Mhm.
views,
They are who they are.
but it wasn't like there wasn't like this obsessive on the part of the church that like everything was political, right? It's like
Mhm.
like I remember like as a kid, watching Veggie Tales or kind of these normal like Christian things and going to church and like sermons weren't generally about politics. It was the gospel, right? It's exegeting, a biblical story.
Right.
But it feels like a lot of the Christian conversation has become where it's all about politics. And I think I saw, I don't know if it was Ryan Burge, but somebody did like statistics and of these like this group of people, right? Like there's even like there's things that are like not even historical Christian teaching, right? Like a certain like even, I think it was the majority don't believe in the Trinity and like things
Yes.
that we before would have seen as much more important, but it seems like now as long as you have like right politics, you can like that seems to be the one. So have you noticed that? Is that more of an
Yes.
online thing or
I think it's definitely online. It's a little bit in real life as well. It ties in with my story, and I just dropped one of my earbuds, but let me put this back in. Ties in with my story. I came to Christ when I was 12 years old, and it was 1979. So after that, I mean, I'd been in church before that too, but I've been very involved in the church ever since. White, evangelical, Southern Baptist, the whole nine yards. And so 1979 was the year before 1980, which was when the moral majority first took root. And so I've watched this. I loved Ronald Reagan. I missed getting to vote for him by 2 weeks for his second term. I turned 18 too late. It was really too bad because I loved Ronald Reagan. I think we all did. And through a couple of generations, though, and I am guilty of this, we discipled our people into the idea that being a Christian is being a Republican, and being a Republican is part of being a Christian. And for during the Reagan years, during Bush one, that was pretty consistent. It was pretty safe. Now, in those days, you had a lot of old New Deal Democrats that were still involved in churches. And as those folks died off, the more Christians identified as Republican. And then you had the Clinton years, and we couldn't stand Bill Clinton, and we opposed him for good reason, especially on his personal behavior. That was well deserved, and we were right to do that. And then, of course, W. Bush came along, and I'll never forget, I've never seen more bumper stickers in church parking lots than I did when George W. Bush was running in both 2000 and 2004. Every other car would have a Bush sticker. And I remember sitting in church and just praying for specific places in Ohio to vote for George W. Bush to save Christian America because I feared that that year it was John Kerry, but if a Democrat got elected, then we were just done. We were just toast. So we've all got this idea. And then you have the Obama years and Obama running against McCain and then against Romney. And our folks just didn't take too well either of those folks. So through all of this, we've got two generations worth of discipleship where voting Republican was an important part of Christian living. And we have folks that have the idea that they're putting their lives on the line, that they're going to lose everything if the Democrat wins. And while I agree with the Democrats on nothing now or then, one, I believe that God is bigger than the United States and God is bigger than two um, useless, useless might be the wrong word, but two worthless political parties. God is bigger than all that. And he allows certain leaders to come into place, whether it is George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, whoever it is. Bible says that God allows certain leaders to come into power. They may be good, they may be bad, but God allows it. And we have to trust him and we have to trust him through it. So when Donald Trump came along, of course, I was never a fan of him. And when he came along, at that point, I think I was able to separate my faith from my party. I still identify as a Republican. I vote Republican all the way down the line. except for president. I vote for my senator, my representative, all my local offices. I vote straight Republican all the way down the ballot. I voted third party in 2016. I voted for Trump in 2020 mainly because of the way Democrats handled COVID. Then January 6th happened, and I was like, never again, Trump. So I wrote in third party in 2024 last year. So I think what's happened is we have discipled people, one, that being a Republican is part of being a Christian. You can't be a good Christian unless you vote Republican. And we have assumed more of an identity as a Republican than we have as a Christian. And some folks would argue with that, and I get that. And I can only see that because of where I've been. Because at one point in my younger years, I was involved in the Republican Party. I was a precinct chairman. I was a student at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I was involved in politics. And I was the local precinct chairman for the area where the school was. And part of my story is I knew how most of the students voted, or at least what party primary they voted in, and the professors. And sure, I was interested in ministry, I was interested in theology and the Bible, but my passion was politics. God called me out on that. And it took years, decades to figure that out because I mixed up my party activism with ministry. I remember going out and putting those Christian Coalition flyers on windshields at churches that didn't pass them out. I thought I was doing ministry. I thought I was doing the Lord's work. I wasn't doing ministry. I was doing politics. I wasn't doing the Lord's work. I was doing the Republican Party's work. And sure, Ralph Reed might have gotten rich off of it. That was in his young days with the Christian Coalition, but that was politics. And when politics becomes your passion like that, it becomes an idol. And God deals with people who put things above himself, who put things above him, and who make idols out of certain things. And for me, politics and political activism became an idol. And I've got more stories to tell about that, but we just made politics an idol. I know I've been long winded on that, but that's my personal story and things that I've learned as I've gotten older. So I think that we just have a lot of folks that believe that voting Republican is part of Christian discipleship, and it's not. Now, most of us will vote that way anyway, and there's a lot of folks that hold their nose and vote for Trump, and I don't have an issue with that. Um, I have an issue with folks that put the Trump movement ahead of their commitment to Christ, and some folks believe it's one and the same, and some folks don't see what they're doing, and everybody's at a different place in their lives, and and that's between them and God. And that's something that I had to deal with over a period of time and a period of years. So again, I'm being long-winded, but I do see that. I see, at least in real life, folks that have wrapped their party and their country in with their relationship with God. They're not the same thing.
No, I think that's really good, and I appreciate that you said all that. Um, and it is because like it is probably one of those things that we all do together, right? The stakes are high, and so it is easy to. And by the stakes are high, like I don't mean like the country's going to end if the other party wins, but just
Right.
monumental things happen, right? And
Absolutely.
they are important. But so I guess that kind of leads into like the next question that's coming up for me is so obviously, you're not advocating that we don't be involved in politics,
Not at all.
but how do you, so to like, a Christian who wants to find that balance, how do
Mhm.
you, how would you, what advice would you give them for finding the balance of being an engaged citizen, engaging the political process, but not making it an idol?
I would say vote. It's important to vote. We all have a right and a responsibility to vote, and people died for that. So it's important to vote. If you feel like you need to be involved in the process, do it. Whether it's campaigning for candidates, working for candidates, whether it's working for a politician, do it. We have the freedom and the responsibility just like any other citizen does. I believe we need to be involved in the process. But at the same time, we have to leave the results up to God, and two, we cannot consider it ministry because ultimately it's just politics and ultimately it's earthly. And their faith and politics are two different things. And they can influence each other, but ultimately they're two different things. And just because we elect a Republican politician doesn't mean we're going to get the country we want. We might get some things we want. And there are some things I've seen from the Trump administration that I appreciate. I can call out the good as well as the bad. I will call balls and strikes, things that I appreciate. And there's very little from the Democrat Party that I would want. So I appreciate that. But at the same time, we cannot put our identity in our country and our party. Our identity, if you're a Christian, your identity needs to be in Christ first.
Mhm.
But then again, voting Republican is not ministry, it's just citizenship. It's not discipleship, it's just citizenship. And at the end of the day, God is in control. And if he wants a leftist party to be in control, he's going to allow that to happen. And he'll do it to get our attention if we listen.
Mm. That's viewing the sovereignty of God in all things. I think that's really that's
Absolutely.
kind of what I'm getting from that. And I think
I
that's
had to learn that. And I had to learn that the hard way because I used to believe that if we didn't elect X group of politicians, that we were just toast.
mm,
And God is in control and he's a lot bigger than we are. And I had to learn that the hard way. He's bigger than we are and he is in control. And he will use good people, he will use evil people. He did it all throughout the Bible, he did it all throughout the Old Testament. But he works and he takes care of his people when his people come to him in repentance and when his people come to him in trust.
mm. So we obviously live in a very polarized time, right? Like
Definitely.
the stakes have never felt higher, right? To,
Mhm.
both, I'm pretty sure both sides, right? If you were to ask them, they're like, the country's coming to an end, everything's tearing apart. What do you see, right? Just not necessarily just politics, just generally broadly, what role do you think Christians individually and churches can play in kind of, I don't know, speaking to this moment, right, that we're
There's
living?
a passage in Jeremiah, and the Jewish people are in exile in Babylon by this time. And Eric Erickson talks about it all the time, and he takes this point of view, but it says, seek the welfare of the city, for there you will find me. Vague, that's kind of a vague paraphrase of that. Seek the welfare of the city, and there you will find me. So, yes, go and bloom where you're planted, be where you are. God's telling the Israelites, you're going to be there a while. So stay, make the best place you can make, stay and raise families, do the right thing, do good by people, but don't expect to get out of there. And that's where we are. I think we take politics too seriously. I think we wrap ourselves too much into it. I know folks that watch Fox News 6, 7 days a week, 24/7. They've just got it on. And we're all influenced by whatever media we consume. It doesn't matter who we are, it doesn't matter where we are. We're all influenced by that. But I think Prophet Jeremiah gets it right. And I think Eric Erickson gets it right by magnifying him and multiplying him, just by saying, seek the welfare of the city, and there you will find me.
I like that.
And do right by your fellow citizens, do good to your fellow citizens, raise families, be fruitful and multiply, and trust God with the results.
Mm. So another question kind of related. So if there was someone, right, they're, they're in a church, right, or they're in a community, like they're in a Christian community, and every weekend, right, it's, the pastor's getting more and more inflamed, right? People are kind of tearing each other apart. Short of finding a new church, what or I think another common thing is like family and like a family,
Yeah.
and you can't even sit down to dinner without like
No.
getting blown up on politics. How would you respond? Like, would a Christian who's kind of caught in the middle of that? How would you recommend that they react to that?
I would say just try to um, turn down the level, turn down the volume a bit, because I used to be like that. When I was in my 20s, and of course, by this time, I mean, this is long ago, these were the Bush Clinton years. And I went to a church and we had small groups that met during the week. And we would have Bible study and prayer. And then we have fellowship afterwards. And I'd wind up talking politics with somebody. Usually it was somebody I agreed with, but not all the time. And I would go over what Rush Limbaugh talked about that day. and I could quote him chapter and verse. And I had it mixed up to um, where what I was hearing on the radio tied in with what I was hearing through church. And it's not the same thing. But I would suggest just to be a calming and peaceful influence in whatever way is possible, and to just turn the temperature down and turn the volume down, because politics is important. We have to do right by our neighbors. We have to do right by them. We have to do well by them, and we have to care about certain issues. But at the same time, it can't be what identifies us. It can't be what drives us. We only have so long on this earth. And there are things that we need to put and prioritize over others. So I would say, just try to be chill and to turn the temperature down. And if it's at a family, if it's a family meeting, family dinner, and you've got to just shut it down or change the conversation, then do it and do it, because there's things that are worth getting worked up over, and there are things that aren't. I never thought I would say this, but there are. That's true. Um, and at the same time, we're not always going to agree whether it is on the substance or of the volume of the issue.
Hmm.
So it's just, live peaceable with all people, live peaceably with all people.
Hmm. I love that too. And so the one of the other things that was coming to my mind as you were talking was, um, so obviously we talked about how Christians, right, are, right now they're divided about politics, or they're united largely around politics and like some of these things on doctrine, which things that when I look, I'm like, well, wait, that's a pretty important historical part of
Definitely,
Christianity, and yet
definitely.
they're divided on that, but they don't seem to care.
Right.
How how could we go about like, because one of the things that, I look to, particularly like my denomination, we came out of like the Second Great Awakening. And, before that, right, the American Revolution in a lot of ways, and I don't believe it was I don't believe it was because, they were obsessed about politics, but I believe
No.
the ideas of human freedom and the dignity of the individual that kind of came out of the First Great Awakening was really part of the atmosphere that led to the foundation of this country and their desire to put the First Amendment in there, Washington's desire to write to Jewish people, like that all came out of
Yes,
that kind of atmosphere.
absolutely.
And so I don't think politics can do what I'm about to ask, but I guess my question is like, practically, what can we do to kind of have like a third great awakening, right? Like an actual revival, not like a political revival, right? Where we
That's
all are
a
united over
golly.
Trump.
That's a real good question. Is I think it's something that everybody wants at a head level, because a lot of us, especially people my age and older, not so much my age, but especially my parents' age, grew up in an environment where it was accepted and expected if people went to church. And whether they believed the gospel or not, whether they believe in Jesus or not, it was necessary to be a respected member of society to be part of a local church. If you wanted to do well in business, you need to be part of a church. If you wanted a political career, you need to be part of a church. I remember Russell Moore, and I'm not supposed to talk about him because he's kind of been run out of the tribe, but I remember him telling a story about somebody in college that asked him what was a good church to join. The guy was an atheist, but he wanted to be part of a church because it would have been good for his political career. Well, I mean, we don't really have that anymore. And people want that back. And they say they want a third great awakening. And I believe a lot of people do. But you are absolutely right, 155%. That's not going to happen through politics. And there is a God-shaped hole in everyone, and we have a lot of folks that are trying to fill that with politics, trying to fill it up with some kind of cultural renewal. And we've had a little bit of cultural vibe shift in the last few months on a few certain issues, but that's not spiritual. That's cultural. And for cultural revival, we got to want it. And we got to be willing to pray. We got to be willing to repent of our sins. And we've got to be willing to remove idols in our lives that may remove that. And finally, we talk about churches. We need to be known for the gospel. No matter what branch it comes from, no matter what part of the tree, what part of the body of Christ we're from, we need to be known for the gospel, preaching the gospel and serving the people and being something that people want to be a part of. And I know of a lot of places, I've been part of churches that are known more for politics than they are for the gospel.
Mm,
Now, even if they're doing great gospel work and leading people to Christ and doing work in the community and serving the people, they're known for the statements that their pastors make on politics. Some of them are good statements, some of them are out of line. But nonetheless, we got to be famous for the gospel because that's what we're all about. We're not about America. We're not about the Republican Party. Those are good things. Well, America is a good thing. The Republican Party is debatable, but but that's not what the church is about. We're about the gospel. Preach the gospel and serve the people. Pray, pray like we never depended on it before, like we never have before. And God might just come through, but we got to be sold out to Him and we got to give it to Him, and it's got to be something He wants. And it might not even be something we recognize. Because
mm,
I think we're looking for a cultural revival. I don't know how bad we want a spiritual revival. We're getting some cultural vibe shift. We're getting some pushback, especially on things like trans issues. I mean, folks don't feel pressured to use pronouns anymore. That's a good thing. There's a little bit of pushback on some of these things, and I'm grateful for that. But that's not a spiritual revival. That's not spiritual, and that's not revival. That's just a little bit of a vibe shift. It's good, and we'll take it. That's not what it's all about.
mm. And one of the things that kind of woke me up in the recent years to the fact that a lot of the right was more about the vibe shift and more about they just wanted to be in control of the levers of power was the
Yeah.
fact that like for most of my like young years like in the 2010s like growing up in the conservative movement, right, one of the things that we were consistently against was like the incipient cancel culture, right, that generally
Hmm.
came from left-wing institutions against
Hmm.
people for just holding normal views. And so
Hmm.
I was always like, and the arguments we were making, and I think they were right to make them, and I still believe these things, was that that wasn't good. That kind of cancel culture was toxic. And yet, in recent years, now as the vibe shift happens, you're starting to see those same tactics only from the right. And I'm like, wait a minute, right? Like, I thought we were against cancel culture. But I guess, and it goes to your point about we have to be known for the gospel, is like
Right.
the actual antidote to cancel culture is a grace culture. It's a culture that,
Absolutely.
like, I forget what the recent thing was with some woman, or Chris Rufo was talking about it, and some woman, I guess, in college had tweeted some legitimately bad things. But like personally, I was against it when like people would comb through right wingers who were getting a job, their old tweets, and like I don't really like it. Like I may not like what I didn't like what this woman said, and I don't like her current views, but like I just don't like the idea in principle of trying to use someone's past against them. But I guess, and to your point, until we actually are working on changing people's hearts rather than just politics and society,
It's all about the heart.
we're not going to have a grace culture. So,
It's all about the heart. It's not just about winning the argument. It's not just about owning the libs. It's not just about winning a cultural battle, but it's about winning the hearts and minds of people. Spirit of God does that first in a spiritual way with spiritual things. But even on a political level and just a secular political level, you've got to win the hearts and minds of people. And rather than just owning the libs, the idea should be converting the libs over to your point of view. And for them, it should be converting us over to their point of view, even though I totally disagree with their point of view. But that should be the idea.
hmm,
Rather than just this whole cancellation thing. And if you step out of line, then you're just canceled and your life is ruined. And we can think of all sorts of people that have just pushed back in one way, shape, or form. Somebody else I'm not supposed to talk about, David French. I mean, that's happened to him in a big way. And I
yeah.
don't agree with David on everything, especially now, but he is not a liberal.
And
He's just
the
come out of,
things I've
he's
seen said about him, and especially his adopted daughter, is just
definitely.
some of the most vile stuff.
It definitely, definitely. And I mean, no wonder he has taken some of the steps he's made and some of the positions he's made. I don't blame him and Nancy at all. If I had gone through that, that's absolutely right. I mean, he got run out of his tribe, he got run out of his community just for taking a stand against Donald Trump and for having an adopted daughter from Africa. It was
Mm,
just wrong. So, in a way, you can't blame him, but at the same time, 80% of the time, he's right. Now, there are some things that I will disagree with him on, and I will disagree with his tone as well, with his targets. But overall, I mean, he's one of us.
yeah, he's a good.
And he's just that's just one example, and I could come up with many more people that just speak up against this whole thing, against this populism, against Trumpism, and against Trump, because there are a lot of people that want a seat at the table, and they will cancel and shut down and ruin the careers of somebody who will dare to oppose them. We see it in all sorts of places in all sorts of ways.
Mm. So I see Zoom is giving me a 2 minute countdown, but
Ooh,
I got another question for you. But first, I want to make sure tell everyone that go follow. You should go follow John Morgan on X, and I
John Morgan, not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer in Florida. I'm just a guy in Texas.
nice. And go follow him on X, and also, and I've got the so I, today I was looking over your Substack. I saw you had a Substack, and I got to give a shout out to my buddy Justin Stanley over in Detroit, who's coined a term "touch grass totalitarianism." And that's the hashtag. Whenever some Zoomer or somebody says something that's just like totally like too online brain, he's like touch grass totalitarianism. So
Go
love
touch grass, just
he
like
would
Eric
love your
Erickson
Substack.
says. Go touch grass.
Yeah. So, kind of in wrapping up, what inspired the podcast or the not the podcast, the Substack? The name, but then also just kind of for your thoughts on faith and culture and what
Eric
brought you to
Erickson
find that.
Eric Erickson inspired the title just to go touch grass because I spend all day online. I work from home. I travel very rarely anymore. I used to travel all the time for work. I will go on my second work trip in October, and it's overseas. But so I'm home all day. I'm online. It's really easy to just get trapped in that online world. And I see Eric Erickson telling people all the time, go touch grass, go live in the real world, go be with real people. So it's just dealing with real things. And my Substack is really more of a devotional and spiritual thing than anything else. I try not to touch hot button issues. I don't have many subscribers, but they come from a wide variety of places. I most recently taught a Bible study class at my church of about 40 senior adults, and some of them subscribe to it. And we're in the process of changing churches now. But some of those folks subscribe